Okay, hello everybody. Thank you so much for joining me on this live broadcast. It's my first ever Instagram live broadcast, and I'm really very excited about it. Um, okay, we're telling your followers to join your video, so hold on for a second, and then we'll start immediately. And of course, I'll have Nnimmo Bassey join us. I'll send him this quickly. Hi, Oluwaseun, Victor. Thank you so much for joining this live broadcast. Oops. Thank you so much, Pumpkins and Tassel. Okay, so for those of you who've been asking me, where have you been? What happened? Did you just disappear? Well, I would say I just took what is going on. Okay. Yeah, so many people are joining. Thank you so much for all Lazarus, OKK. Alex99, thank you very much. You're still holding on to. Okay, Mr. Nnimmo has joined us now. Mr. Nnimmo, can you tap join live video so we'll have you live? Join us now. Anyway, the COVID virus has left so many of us stuck at home. We've been indoors in our concrete spaces. And people have talked about how they've noticed that there are more animals joining in, coming out of where they called home. I mean, this was where they called home, but they're now joining, coming out to interact with nature more than before because there's a lot more silence. Everything is more quiet, and they love it like this. So this is part of what this is all about. We're not. We're really sad that thousands of people have died from this virus. Is really hurting everybody, but also we want to talk about the impact of this on nature. And okay. Oh, okay. Can you please tilt it?
Vertically?
Not landscape. Yeah, vertically.
Oh no, who's going to hold this stuff up?
Oh my God! You can use books. You can. Oh yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Can you put a book behind it?
There are many books already on this table.
Oh la la.
Oh la la. How are you doing?
I'm good, and you? Ça va?
Ça va bien. Et famille?
Oui, ça va, ça va. Okay,
Okay.
thank you so much for joining us. I'll begin with talking about, or maybe paying a bit of tribute to all those we've lost by this virus. We've lost over 190,000 people worldwide, and that's a staggering number. While it is not the way we wanted nature to be healed, it has happened. So what are your thoughts on this? We don't celebrate this, but how do you see this impacting nature? What has happened? COVID virus, we're all staying at home. We can't come out. We're not flying the planes. We're not driving our cars. What impact has it had?
First of all, I believe, thank you for having me on this chat. But I think coronavirus, that tiny virus, has taught us to be humble. Has taught us that massive accumulation of anything, wealth, power, position, doesn't mean anything at the end of the day. It has also taught us to learn that we can stay at home for a little bit of time and get to know our environment, know our neighborhoods. There are a lot of people who don't really know where they're living. And this being forced to stay at home, personally, has made me to know that I have a lot of neighbors I never knew I had. Birds of different varieties, different kinds of lizards, insects, and even the trees. I saw some plants I never knew. They were not planted by anybody, but they've been growing around me and I never knew. So I think this has given us time to regain a bit of humanity in that sense. But it's been much more fruitful for nature itself because human beings have not been able to impact negatively on nature as we've been doing before. Staying at home has allowed forests to regrow, regenerate, rivers to get a bit cleaner because of less transportation, fossil fuel-driven boats and stuff like that. So on that scale, even some factories have been closed down, reducing the amount of pollution into the atmosphere. So all these have been positive, ecologically speaking.
Ecologically speaking, now we've seen pictures of what you mentioned, in Italy, where we're seeing dolphins appearing, we're seeing more birds flying, we're even seeing the lions out, on the roads, and they're just chilling. Humans are no more there. But for some people, they said deforestation is still happening, logging is still happening. What would you say about that?
Logging certainly will still be happening, but cannot be at the scale it was happening before, because movements are more restricted. For example, I'm speaking to you from Nigeria. I can't easily travel from one state to another because the borders of the states are more or less closed. Although there are always ways to go around these things, but it's not as smooth sail as was the case before the pandemic hit home. We've heard stories about and seen videos. Yesterday I was speaking with a friend who lives in Venice, an architect in Venice, who likes telling me about the environment there. And he was telling me that the canal is almost transparent at this time. I couldn't believe it because, they move around with their taxi is boating. The water is always churned up, but now they can see fish in the water. So in a certain sense, that is okay. But also, we could also suspect that under the lockdown, a lot of contrary activities are going on because nobody's monitoring. This is why for us as environmental justice activists, we've had to retool, rekit, rework the system on which we operate. Because at this time, I don't want to call myself professional activists, but activists who do this on a daily basis are not able to get to certain places. So the community people themselves are actively monitoring environment and reporting what they're seeing. We've seen this with the death of fish along the Niger Delta coast. When it started in Ondo State, when it started in Bayelsa State, activists on the ground began to share photos. When it got to Rivers State, the youths from a group in Bonny Rivers began to issue statements and share photographs, and this has gone all over the world. So there's a shift in how we work, how we can work, and how work will be in future.
And so that will bring me to my next question. How do you think what are the lessons we've learned from this? Do you think we really can rethink the way we do things, our transportation, our energy, generally, how do you think the governments can come together? Do you think Trump might even learn a lesson from what has happened? Do you think he's going to see that, nature has healed or nature is healing? Can we come back better?
I wish you wouldn't go towards Trump because that trumps a lot of things. But let's take Trump as a figure, a metaphor for a politician, the average politician. Politicians are very hard of hearing. So you have to really scream very hard before they will hear you. There are certain things the politicians around the world consider most. They consider corporate interests, corporate sponsors who support their campaigns, and they look at 4 years at a time or 5 years. They don't look in the long term. They thinking about how to get elected and to be re-elected. And so they may not learn a lesson from this. The lesson that would help in the future will come from the grassroots. It means people have to organize, not just asking for this or that to be done, but organize in a way that a movement built will determine who can sit in the state house, who can become the president, who can become the senator. Got to be people who are rooted in the life and communities of people, not people who are professional politicians who know how to twist the stories, sell certain things, messages through media public relations, but people who have really felt the pain of what is going on. Otherwise, there are a lot of lessons to learn about the fact that our energy mode is totally defective. It's been known for many years that dependence on fossil fuel, digging and burning fossil fuels is simply burning the planet. Apart from polluting the environment, it's burning the planet, it's literally. And so that has been known. But whenever you have this conference of parties for climate change, you find that they don't even talk about the impact of global fossil fuels dependence on global warming, even though this is known as the major reason. And this is not easy to, you can easily see why this is so, because this is industry that sponsors, the major sponsors of the conferences. So of course,
And they also make it difficult to come up with a decision.
Precisely because they also boast of influencing the language in their decisions. They boast openly about this, which is very shameful indeed.
Okay, do you think we can come together and work? You know, we've shown that we can actually work together. We've seen what happened with COVID. All the countries are, you know, coming together, helping each other. You know, do you think when it comes to climate change, will it come to that time where we really can work together? I mean, it's puzzling that people believe the signs of COVID, but don't believe the signs of climate change. How does that work?
Well, let me first of all speak about the science of COVID. The science of COVID itself is very controversial because up to this moment, there's no consensus about the source of this virus. Is it from another living organism jumping into humans? Is it from bats or from other animals whose habitat has been destroyed, or animals who are in industrial farms? Or is it something genetically engineered in a laboratory? All these stories are all over the place. Nobody really knows. But we do know that humans produce virulent organisms for biological warfare. And sometimes these things jump out of the laboratory. But we don't know where this one came from. But in terms of science, the science of distancing, that the virus cannot jump more than 1 meter, that is very heartwarming. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble. So we can keep that kind of physical distance, not necessarily social distance, because we can't really be distant socially from family and from other people. We have to still work together. Social distancing may even mean not to use these means to communicate. Yes, the science, to a large extent, people believe that this is something that has to be tackled scientifically as well as socially. But in terms of climate change, I believe the problem is that humans have, because climate change is not a pandemic, people believe that you can fix it. You can keep on polluting and then capture the pollution and sequester or imprison or bury the pollution through various means of geoengineering, kind of planetary manipulation. You can make trees through genetic engineering that will absorb more carbon from the atmosphere and so also sink the carbon. You can tamper with the ocean by growing a lot of algae so that carbon can be absorbed and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. So you can keep on with business as usual and nothing is going to go wrong. But all these have been false solutions, driving the world in a very dangerous pathway. And I do believe more pandemics will come.
We're trying to reconnect to Mr. Nnimmo Bassey.
Yes,
we lost you.
I'm back. Am I not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that is a sign of the time. Sometimes we have to hide and sometimes we have to come back. Now, I was saying that we may actually have more pandemics if we don't change our way of relationship with nature, if we don't change our ways of consumption and destruction. But pandemics give us time to be locked in, time to take some medicines and have ventilators and different things, try to get well. And a lot of people are getting well, and we're all going to go through it at the end of the day. But if the climate catastrophe happens at the rate at what we expect may happen, in a way of cataclysmic weather events, floods overtaking everybody, there will be no locking. You can't lock anybody down when climate change strikes. Everybody will be looking for trees, going to climb to rooftops, but that may not help. So climate change is more of an emergency than the pandemic crisis we're seeing today. But human beings are hard of hearing. I think we're just stupid to a large extent. And unless we take the climate crisis as something potentially more dangerous than the COVID-19 pandemic, then I think it will be a bad day in the future for those who will be around for that.
Talking about taking it seriously, I'll read this out to you. It's from the World Economic Forum website. It says, half of the world's GDP is highly or moderately dependent on nature. For every dollar spent on nature restoration, at least $9 of economic benefits can be expected. Do you think businesses know this or care about this? Do you think they can listen to this?
They don't care about it. They don't really care about it. And this is because the model of exploitation of labor, exploitation of the environment, transformation of nature for profit, the model has worked for them for a long while. They've taken over the politics. Everybody believes that it is the private sector that can save nations. We don't believe that government can do anything. You hear often say government has no business in business. And then when private sector fails, public money is pumped into the pockets of captains of industry to save that industry. And then again, they continue to run the show because, this logic that the public, that the community cannot do things in a way that is sustainable, that is way that is profitable, has twisted the way we relate to one another and the way governments are being run. So, as I was saying, the mode of production, for example, for over 100 years, close to 200 years, we've been dependent on fossil fuels for energy. So you have oil pipelines.
Can you hear me, Mr. Nnimmo? Okay, I'll go ahead.
When they see, when the corporations see the infrastructure they've put in place, they cannot imagine going to invest in renewable energy and other things until they've squeezed the last drop, the last dollar from what they've put in place. And so if people want to talk about moving toward renewable energy, they'll tell you, well, let's go to bioenergy. Let's go to biofuels, because that will still use the same infrastructure, pipelines, filling stations, and all those things. So we've seen consistently, industries and politicians believing that we cannot do otherwise. Sometimes when we're having this conversation, people will say Nigeria cannot survive without crude oil. I don't want to swear. I don't want to use a swear word, but I think that is very stupid. It's actually very stupid. Very stupid. Nigeria can survive without crude oil. Nigeria was richer without crude oil. Before crude oil became a major income earner in Nigeria, we had good infrastructure, good educational system, good health system. We had good politics.
But we were not up to 200 million. We're not almost 200 million.
Even now, we are not anywhere close to 200 million. The speculation of the World Bank and others who just who just kind of speculate about what the population of Nigeria is. We've not had credible census. You look back to check the historical trajectory of our population. All these are speculations. Our statistics are very faulty. And when we blow our population figures out of proportion, we can't even provide for that fiction. It's pure fiction. During the last election, many people were counted twice. They counted in the cities, counted in the villages. And of course, we also know the policies of every region wanted to be bigger than the next region. Every village wanted to have more population than the next village. And so all these figures are cooked up. We have to count Nigerians. Where are the 200 million Nigerians? Are they all abroad? Maybe they're all living in diaspora. Well, certainly not here. And so I don't buy I don't believe that Nigeria can suddenly be so large compared to other nations on the continent. I mean, I'm not saying that we're not a big population, but the population figure we're using is bogus. It's extremely bogus. Extremely, extremely bogus. And we need to do something about that.
So you're saying Nigeria can survive without oil?
Nigeria, that's the thought. Yes, Nigeria does well, would do much better without oil, because as I said in the past, and you interjected by saying that we're not the 200 million. Just made my blood to boil.
Go ahead.
So the truth is that, as I was saying, everything was going well. Politics was well, but now politics is about who is going to be in Abuja to control the price. That remains.
I mean, while we wait for him to reconnect, you can send in questions.
As long as that remains. Okay.
Go ahead.
As long as that remains as the driving force for politics, being in a position to control the resources that come from petroleum sector, then of course we cannot invest in others. Nigerians are very inventive, very creative, very brilliant. We have the creative industry, the movies, the music, the best, some of the best in the world. They bring a lot of income to the nation. We have a lot of, up to 70% of Nigerians in the informal sector. They're not in the formal sector. So when we're saying that oil is the only thing that can keep this nation going, we forget the fact that a lot of our people are living outside of the economy. outside of the formal economy. So the economy we're complaining about is the economy that's driven by, calculated by, or by GDP, which somebody has said actually means gross domestic problems, not gross domestic product. The GDP was actually an invention for nations to use against each other after the Second World War. It wasn't really an index to measure. It's never an index to measure the well-being of the people. So in 2014,
yeah, so it should be happiness index, well-being index, a much better index than the GDP.
We need to look at the more reasonable in the indices. How are people living well? In 2014, Nigeria became the biggest economy in Africa. Did that change anybody's life? Did it affect the person on the street? Did it affect anything? Did we have electricity? Does water run in the pipes around our communities? No. Okay, if you don't have the basic things, no, you don't have the basic things. Calculations of GDP.
I'd like to add that if you're watching and you have any question at all, you can type your questions and we'll take the questions at the end of our broadcast. So talking about oil, we know what has happened, all-time negative. Unbelievable for many across the world, and for environmentalists that who've been saying that we should leave the oil in the soil. It has happened. How did you feel about this? I saw your display picture where you said it's been buried. How do you feel about the oil prices, and how does this affect the work of environmentalists? What do you have to say?
I have mixed feelings about it. Now, one of the biggest challenges we have, I'm happy that oil prices are crashing, and I hope they crash further.
Oh my God.
So that when you go to, when oil price goes below zero, like that's going to happen in May trading in the US, the oil companies will pay those who buy the oil to take the oil from them because they just want to offload it. So can you imagine a situation where you go to a filling station, a gas station, and you fill your tank, and then the owner of the station pays you some money for helping to relieve the pressure on their storage? That may not happen, but it's a way to understand what it means when the oil price goes negative. Now, I believe that with the price of oil collapsing, politicians and citizens will be forced to think of other ways of driving the economy, of getting people to work. The oil sector doesn't really employ many people it's just the money that it brings. If for a country like Africa, Nigeria, and other African countries, about 90% of the investment in that sector is actually done abroad, outside of the country. All the platforms and the processing facilities are fabricated abroad, they're brought and just installed. So it doesn't have a multiplier effect.
We're trying to reconnect to Nnimmo Bassey, but I'd like to thank everyone who have joined us. Bob Manuel, Bumi, Ifi, the Choco, Adetunji. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think my connection has been very, very challenging. I may have to change to another system, but let's see how it goes. Let me just conclude what I was trying to say. Now, in the oil prices, the way it affects us in Nigeria, for example, is that for the budget of this year, $57 per barrel was the benchmark. A country like Tunisia fixed it at $60 per barrel. Now, for us in Nigeria, with oil price going around $20 a barrel for the quality of crude that we produce, that means we are producing at a very low rate. And of course, our budget is in trouble, and they're going to have to review everything. But the cost of production of oil in Nigeria is $30 a barrel. In some countries, it's as low as $5 a barrel. So why is oil in Nigeria so expensive to produce when there's no care of the environment, when there's no care for the communities, when there's little or any kind of anything really controlling what they do, when they are the ones, the oil companies are the ones who determine the cost of production. So they ensure that they make it as high as possible. But because the state and the oil companies are in joint partnership, they can't really have much say. The state and the oil company benefit, but the people are left to handle the wrong end of the stick. So when oil price collapses, all this needs to be going to be reviewed. We need to look at the petroleum industry bill dispassionately. This has been kept in the cooler for so long that the Minister of Petroleum, who is our president, has not bothered to do anything about it. And so there are a lot of issues. when oil becomes a stranded asset, as it's going to become, either now or in the next decade or so, because the world is moving away from it, the world is investing in other technologies, then we'll be forced to really sit down and do what we should have done 60.
So what does this whole, world without oil mean for the Niger Delta? So far, the funds disbursed for that cleanup, which would take about 30 to 50 years to happen, NNPC, Shell, Total, Ajib have so far, the first tranche is about 360 million US dollars for that cleanup. What would be the future of this cleanup with the price of oil at this level if nothing changes?
Now, this is one thing I should have mentioned when I was speaking just a few moments ago. If the oil price collapses and oil becomes a no business, then we're going to end up with the entire Niger Delta polluted, parts of Lagos contaminated, and nobody's going to invest in the cleanup. And so we'll actually sunk. It's a tragedy unfolding for the Niger Delta. Right now, there's hope of a cleanup, but if oil prices collapse to the negative or become so low that there's even no need to extract it, you're going to have this equipment abandoned, and they will keep on polluting, leaking, and people will keep on, the pipelines will be failing, and it's going to be a tragedy. It's a tragedy actually already. It's a tragedy, but it's going to get compounded. Now, with regard to the ongoing Ogoni cleanup, I understand from the pandemic has placed a halt on it possibly because you cannot have so many people in close proximity working together, or for whatever reason. Now, the initial takeoff of for the cleanup is $1 billion US dollars, basically a bit less than that if you look at the fractions of contributions, and that was divided to 5 years. So you got the monies to come in. So far, 2 years funds for 2 years are in the account. Funds for 2 years are in the account. The second year's account, the final bits of it came in early this year, not last year. They came in January 2019 and January 2020. So conceivably, there's enough funding in the bank to do the basic cleanup. To do some basic things and clean up some parts of Ogoni land. But there are other things beyond just the cleanup. There are the other social cases like providing water for the people, actually carrying out health audits so you can begin to treat the people and get them to recover from years and years of exposure to harmful toxins and pollution in the area. So on the long run, if the oil price rebounds for maybe 2 or 3 more years, or because certainly oil price will collapse eventually, then we can hope to see the cleanup of that part of the Niger Delta done. But what about the rest of the Niger Delta? This is my biggest concern right now. We have not even done the examination, the audit, the study of the level of pollution in other parts of the Niger Delta. So we cannot even speculate how long it will take to clean. If Ogoni land is cleaned, basically done in 5 years, as you said earlier, it will take 20 years or more years for the environment itself to be restored. It's cleanup, remediation, then restoration. It takes time for nature to regain itself. So we have a long, drawn struggle for the Niger Delta to be cleaned up. We see this in other parts of Africa. If you go to South Sudan, the oil-producing area. Oil was the major struggle between South Sudan and Sudan. And it's still the source of conflict in South Sudan. But the areas where oil is being extracted, the pollution is incredible. It's close to, it's not as bad as Niger Delta, but it's close to what we have in Niger Delta. So it's a dilemma for the African continent.
The Niger Delta, of course, Ogoni has been described as the most polluted region in the world. That's huge. For those who have no idea of what the true impact of oil exploration is in the Niger Delta, I've been there, I've seen it, I've opened up fish, and you were there, and we saw oil inside. I've been with fishermen who toiled for hours, old fishermen, and all they came up with was just tiny little fish, So give us a sense of what is the devastation like in the Niger Delta.
Ugochi, I think you can do that better than I. You've seen it all, you've experienced it. we've been out there together. So, but it's extremely difficult to describe the pollution in the Niger Delta because it's unbelievable. It takes being there before you can really understand it. And to me, the best way for people to understand it, so Nigerians from other regions should visit there when the lockdown is over. Over the years, we've been having exchange visits from other countries, community people from other countries where oil is either being explored or is being extracted. I remember in the early 1990s, or mid-1990s, we had visitors. I went to some parts of Bayelsa State with visitors from Colombia, from Ecuador, from Chad, from South Africa, from Thailand, from Philippines. I would just go around. And we got to a place, a comrade from Chad said, if I'd been from this place, I would have been a revolutionary. And I would just look at him wondering how to respond to that. Then an old man who was from Colombia, and the Uwa people resisted oil, claiming that oil was the blood of the earth, and that drilling oil means drilling the blood of Mother Earth. And so this man said, you saying that you would have been a revolutionary if you were from Niger Delta? No. You should be a revolutionary no matter where you come from. If you observe your environment, you see that there are things that are wrong that needs to be tackled, and you should speak up and do something about it. So that to me was just an expression of how bad the situation was. Some years back, we visited a place in South Africa called Witbank. The Witbank, some areas around there, they've been having coal mines that have been abandoned for many decades that are on fire underground coal mines. They're burning. When you go to some parts of that area, you'll be seeing heat simmering from fields. And you can't just walk wherever you want to walk because you could fall into a sinkhole. The earth could just give up and you get yourself drawn into a hole, and you enter into fire, kind of hellfire underground. So some people from friends from Nigeria were debating with the citizens from that area that someone said Nigeria is more polluted. And also the other guys from South Africa were saying our area is more polluted. They were competing about which is more polluted. So whether it's crude oil or whether it's gas or coal, the devastation is horrible. Those who are in Ghana should go to Obuasi. Obuasi has the biggest gold mine in Africa. Go and see the devastation in that community. People can't even drink water from the street because of cyanide washed from the gold mines. So it's coming back to Niger Delta. I visit the oil fields or to see the pollution regularly. And you could just look as far as your eye can see sometimes. Every water is covered with crude oil. This cannot happen anywhere else in the world. Citizens will not take it lying low. Then you go to some places, pollution that occurred. There's a particular case that's been in the court for many years against Shell and the communities at Ebubu Ejama. I believe the pollution occurred during this Nigerian civil war. And so that was how many years ago? And it's still an issue of contention because the area that was polluted is being fenced and it's protected, defended, but it's not cleaned up. So you have cleanup that's been there for years, for ages, and new cleanups are happening even as we speak. So it's a tragic situation. I mean, the case of Ogoni, documented by United Nations Environment Program, really illustrates to the whole world what is going on. All the water is polluted by hydrocarbons. In some places, the water has benzene up to 900 levels above what the World Health Organization approves for drinking water. You're having gas flares burning 24 hours a day in so many locations in Niger Delta, contaminating the air, impacting the health of the people. And gas flares impact mostly, one of the major impacts is on breathing diseases like bronchitis, asthma, and the rest. Now, if that happens and then coronavirus goes to those communities, all the people are vulnerable because their defense system has already been broken down by gas flaring. So we're talking about ecological crimes all over the region.
That would have been my next question. I mean, the impact would be high for those in the Niger Delta. Although those in Port Harcourt, we know what's happening with the soot, where you literally rub your surfaces and it's black. So we know that this has an impact. And indoor air pollution, outdoor air pollution has an impact and helps aggravate, the impact of COVID virus, the virus on people.
Right. From what we know from popular TV stations, radio stations, and newspapers is that many people don't really die from the COVID-19. They're dying because they already had other underlying health issues. If people are really healthy before the virus comes, they stand a good chance of fighting the virus. But people are already sick with heart diseases, lung diseases, and so on and so forth. Then the virus takes advantage of that, and the people get the sicknesses get more complicated, and the people lose their lives. So this is the challenge we have. It's in the oil sector. The health of people in the communities are already compromised. Life expectancy in Niger Delta, as you know, is about 41 years. Nationally, it's 56 for women, 54 for men, or thereabout. So if you have that, I don't think there's anywhere else in the world where life expectancy is as low as that. So it's really a living tragedy when you're having, as my friend Celestina Kobari would say, festivals of funerals every weekend in Ogoniland. Festivals of funerals. A 25-year-old girl dies, and you have to see a big banner for a life well spent. We regret to announce the passage of an icon. What kind of icon is that? What life was well spent? So it's very painful to even talk about it.
Someone asked the question, when will gas flaring stop in Nigeria? An age-long question. You could also talk about that. When will it stop?
You know, the law to gas flaring was outlawed in Nigeria with effect from January 1984 by a law that was a military decree that was enacted in 1979. Took effect 1st January 1984. But the crime was kind of moderated by the fact that the flarer must get a permit from the Minister of Environment and also pay a fine. But the fine is nothing compared to the gain of burning the gas flare. And the oil companies had said, in fact, they were also questioned in the 1960s by the British government that the Nigerians would hold them to account for the kind of pollution they are doing. This was 1963. There was a communication between the British government and the oil company. And the oil company response was that there was no market or demand for natural gas. And so they had to this became a normal industry practice. They even wrote that on their website some years ago. Maybe they've taken it off now, one of the oil companies. And so now, by last year, the government of Nigeria was saying that gas flaring would end in 2020. Probably they thought 2020 would not come. Now we're in 2020. In fact, as at last year, there were two conflicting figures. While the Minister of Petroleum was saying, the Minister of State for Petroleum was saying over and over again that gas flaring would stop in 2020, that they had a master plan to tackle the issue and get over with it. At the same time, the Nigerians' nationally determined contribution submitted to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change stipulated 2030 as the end date for gas flaring in Nigeria. And of course, the environmental policies are built around that. So we have this contradiction within the system, lack of coherence within the government, giving two terminal dates for stopping gas flaring. It shows a lack of seriousness or determination to actually stop gas flaring. So there we are. The answer is blowing in the wind. When will gas flaring stop in Nigeria? Is blowing the wind. I believe what will stop gas flaring quicker is when totally oil prices and gas the sector just collapses. That may be the answer. Yeah. Otherwise, we've seen the master plan. There will be a lot of pipelines be said, gas to be taken here or taken there. A lot of things, and even the government has made a regulation that now says government owns the gas flares and can give access to any investor who wants to utilize the gas flare, either for energy production or for conversion to cooking gas. Because the story has been that investors don't have access to the gas flares because the oil companies won't give them access to the flares.
And we're also constructing this pipeline, gas pipeline from Nigeria to Morocco.
To feed Europe. Well, that's the dream. That's a dream. I want to say pipe dream. Or that's a dream for Nigerian president and the king of Morocco. Let's see how that goes. Gas is not gas is not a better fossil fuel. It's not even a good energy source to bridging the gap between the fossils. It's just as bad.
Okay, so let's ask you about personally. You're getting older. do you see more young people becoming environmental activists as passionate and as passionate as you are? Do you see our young generation being very interested in environmental issues and going head on, to campaign, to make noise, to talk about the injustices happening in Nigeria, in Africa, and across the world? Let's specifically talk about Nigeria.
Yeah. Well, I'm optimistic to a big level because for me, a lot of my energy is spent on interacting with young people, young environmentalists. My organization is conducting regularly schools of ecology. The whole idea is to look at the politics of pollution, because pollution is highly political, and to make people to know that pollution is not accidental. It's things that some people determine to pollute because they make money from polluting, and because also they believe that our lives can be discounted. In 1993 or 1991, there was an internal email in the World Bank by a chief economist who said that African countries are vastly underpolluted. And that since the people don't really live that long, the men don't live that long to have prostate cancer and the rest, if you dump a load of toxic waste in those communities, it doesn't really have much health consequence because they're going to die young anyway. And so that kind of thinking really is very sickening. But this is the way global politics is run. And so young people need to understand the politics of pollution. And this is why in our schools of ecology, everything is about understanding the narrative, understanding our mindsets and the mindset of those who are antagonistic to our environment. And so far, we've seen very, I would say, young people who are really interested and who are doing their bits. Very many organizations. We support a number of organizations who are coming up because we believe in the multiplicity of voices, so that the more the people who are speaking up, the more we can have stronger force to campaign for environmental justice. My only challenge is that sometimes a lot of young activists do take government at their word almost all the time, and they also take multilateral institutions that the United Nations at their word almost every time. And so when they see things like MDGs and now they talk about SDGs, you find them carrying the posters and just celebrating, I'm for SDG this, SDG that. But no, if you really sit down and look at your environment and check, for example, Nigerian environment, and you look at the amount of pollution, Niger Delta, for example, or you go to Kano and see Kano region and see the pollution in the Chalawa River, and go to Lagos and see how the lagoon is contaminated, then you ask yourself, which of the SDGs would work in our country? Are we going to protect life underwater? Are we going to have clean water to drink around? Are we going to have zero hunger? How are you going to achieve that in a polluted environment? So the environment is compromised, and there's no real sense, no serious action to restore things, and we don't have strong campaigns to stand against the aggressors. Then, of course, none of those things will be achieved. They'll just be very high-sounding things. And recently, I was interviewed by a PhD candidate who is working on oil companies and corporate social responsibility. And I began by saying that I don't believe that oil companies in Nigeria can actually engage in anything that can be called corporate social responsibility. That all they do is corporate social irresponsibility. And this guy kept asking...
And greenwashing.
Greenwashing, exactly. In fact, they invest more in image laundering than in science, than in research and development. They spend more on that. I mean, researchers have shown that. And they succeeded in being called, they changed the language, they're being called energy corporations. They are not energy, they're oil companies, for goodness sake. But when you call them energy corporations, you say, oh, these are good people. Everybody wants energy. These people are good guys. So we really have to consciously call them what they are. Oil companies, Chevron Oil Company, Exxon Oil Company. They are not energy corporations. So young people have a lot to do. A mindset, we need to study. A young activists need to study. They need to read books like How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. They need to read The Rachel of the Earth by Franz Fanon. They need to look for The West and the Rest of Us written by Nigerian Chinwezu. They have to. Of course, they should read my own book, To Cook a Continent.
Okay, someone asked, how do we register in the School of Ecology? How do we join that? I'll put a link. I'll put a link on Home contact.
Yeah, they get to our website and sign up for our updates. They can also write to home@homef.org. Usually when we have a School of Ecology, we advertise it, and so people apply. And two are in view. We're going to have a School of Ecology, I believe, within next month. It will be virtual, so you can attend from anywhere you are. We're going to have one on fresh water systems and the need for protected marine ecosystems in Nigeria, in Africa. We're going to have another one on power alternatives. We're not just talking about alternatives to power, it's about power alternatives. So it's about people power and energy power. And so I believe this will be very interesting for young people. And then we're going to have another one on blue economy blues. You hear about blue economy. People say, oh, this is beautiful. Green economy sounded nice. Blue economy also sounds nice. But you have when blue economy hits the road running, it's going to affect local livelihoods in a way that local people may not even expect. And then we're going to have another School of Ecology later in the year on the new Green Deal. We heard about a new Green Deal in the US. We heard about it in Europe. We're not talking about it in Africa. What will it mean for us? What will be the impact when others plot this and then we just say, okay, we want it too, without interrogating it?
I have a question from MM. She says, unfortunately, the oil industry can't collapse right now because that is our highest revenue generation revenue.
That's a wish. That's a wish and a prayer. I think it's a wish and a prayer because it's not a statement of. What I said, that question is actually a prayer that the oil company will not collapse, because if if the oil sector collapses globally, of course Nigeria is collapsed. If you don't have where to sell your oil, where are you going to sell it? The United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change already said, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, wrote a report saying that we have more or less right now about 10 years to keep on burning fossil fuels. If we continue beyond that, we're setting the world on fire. So you're going to we have this window, 1 decade window, to quickly shift and understand that even if the oil is still there, it is not a silver bullet. A minister from Saudi Arabia said many years ago that the Stone Age did not end for lack of stones, and the oil age would not end for lack of oil. That was said by someone from Saudi Arabia. Some people think that they quote me as saying, I didn't say it, I'm quoting a minister from Saudi Arabia. He said the Stone Age did not end for lack of stones. Think about that. You have all the oil you like in this world. You have all the desires and all the hopes and all the money you are enjoying, dollars. But when the world moves from it, the world is going to move from it.
Someone said, can Mr. Nnimmo please expand slightly on how the blue economy will impact small communities?
Oh, you want me to give a lecture on that before? You don't want to come
just briefly, and then they will
join want to come to our School of Ecology.
And the School of Ecology is actually free, right?
It's free, yes. Although we may start changing funds, but if anybody wants to, you go to look for a job and say, I got a certificate from home for attending the School of Ecology, then of course we should get some economic benefit from that. I'm joking. Okay.
So just a little bit of how the blue economy affects.
Okay, the blue economy. What's the blue economy? It's just about exploiting marine ecosystems, and so I mean, the African Union itself says that the blue economy, that our marine ecosystem is the next gold mine, more or less. So it's going to mean more extractive activities in parts of our water bodies, in the ocean, the continental shelf, and the rest. Right now, just think about wherever when you have oil platforms have almost 5 kilometers radius exclusive zone that fishers cannot get near. They're protected by the navies across the continent. Fishermen cannot get there. And many of these platforms are located in places with endemic fish species. And fishermen are kept away from them. Of course, these fat cats on the platform eat a lot of top drop in the ocean. All the fish migrate there, and our people cannot get access to the fish. Now, if the ocean is mapped out for exploitation, it's going to exclude local people, whether we like it or not. It's going to be some place will be no-go areas. This is why we want to begin the NCF, Nigerian Conservation Foundation, have been campaigning for marine protected areas in Nigeria. In Bayelsa State, for example, they have some marine protected areas, but we don't know how that is being enforced. And so we need to expand that campaign. More people need to speak up for it. And so the Blue Economy School of Ecology would also touch on those issues, because our people would be cut off certain things, and that's how it's going to affect. In briefly speaking, that's the way it could affect. Like the green economy. Green economy is not about making the economy green. It's more about the color. You hear about environmental services. Like somebody calculated that the insects and pollinators provide a service that's worth about some billions of dollars by just pollinating plants. And so somebody could say, okay, I have this amount of bees or butterflies or so on. And I'm going to know already people actually hire bees in Europe and North America to pollute, not to pollute, to pollinate their crops. So you go to a bee farmer, buy some beehives, and you know that then you return the bees to the owner of the bees. I mean, this just sounds crazy to me, that you can hire bees and then return the bees. But the thing is that the thinking that means that you can have everything about Mother Earth is about economics, it's about money. You can sell nature, you can exchange nature for this or that. It just makes us not to understand what nature is and that we're a part of nature. You know, sometimes when people say you see trees as carbon sinks, and now but our body is made of carbon. So why don't if Nigeria really has 200 million citizens, why don't we just calculate how much carbon sink is in our body and collect carbon credit from those who are selling carbon?
Okay, it's almost 1 hour. Time ran so fast for an environmental discussion. For 1 hour to be this interesting. Thank you so much, Mr. Nnimmo. But before we go, I'd ask, what can we do at home in isolation, you know, to support the environment? I mean, in France, the people have been told to go from your home, count how many birds you see. So it gives an idea of how much birds we have, you know, still around in our environment. So what can people do while at home, while isolating? How can they support nature?
I'll tell you what I do personally. I think we can do more. This, as I said, before now, I go out of home very early morning, come back in the night, and weekends are not different. And so I really not spent over this stretch of time. And I've found that the best way to really spend my time, apart from doing work from home, is to interact more with the environment. And so myself and my wife, we built garden beds. We're planting okra, we're planting tomatoes, cucumber, we're planting watermelon, we're planting okra, we're planting a number of maize and a number of other things, peppers. And every morning I just go to see to say hello to the plants and feel connected to the plants, document. Sometimes I do, sometimes when they're coming up, I don't even know what kind of plant, what did I plant in this place? I'm such a bad farmer. I'll use an app on my phone, take the picture of the leaves, and then send it up, and it identifies the plant for me. So I don't want to wait till the fruit comes before I know what is coming up where. So it's just a way of exercise on training. So taking care of things around us. If you didn't have a tree, plant a tree in your compound. If your whole compound is cemented, you can get a box or get a pot and plant some. Let there be living greenery around us. If we do that, we're going to end up cleaning up the air, sucking out the pollution, and everybody will be healthier. And that's what we can do. Then spend a lot of time.
We can't go out to get those things now because we are all locked
up. Well, in Nigeria, you can still do that. You're allowed to move in the cities at least certain hours of the day. So if you have boxes in your home, you have cartons, old stuff that you are not using, even your old frying pan, you can use it make a potted plant on it. And then, of course, spend time reading and writing. Write poetry, write stories, write your experiences. We need to keep our mind active. We need to be happy, chat with people.
And maybe if you observe some strange creatures around you, you could take a picture and post on the internet. You know, I mean, lizards and insects and birds, whatever you see, you could just take a picture and post, and we try to identify what they are. And that would help us protect nature and conserve while we're isolating.
Right. And in places where we are allowed to move a little bit, monitor the environment. Monitor what those who want to pollute are doing, those who are doing negative things, and report them. We're seeing, as I mentioned about the dying fish in Nigeria, the community people are reporting. So people are active. We need to be more active.
Thank you so much. Next time I'll talk about what happened with those fish washing up dead. You know, I think I would get someone to talk about what has actually happened and what the impacts. Thank you so much, Nnimmo Bassey, for joining us. Thank you to everyone who joined in. Oh my God, I'm so appreciative. Thank you very much. Loads of people, loads of comments for an environmental Instagram live. I am so overwhelmed. Thank you so much. We'll do more of this. Have a wonderful day and isolate as naturally as possible.
And to everybody, namaste.
Oh, okay. Dalo so. Bye.
So you then.
Oh, okay. So yeah.